Ethan and Laura had been married for 9 years and lived in a quiet suburb outside Seattle. Ethan worked as an architect, while Laura managed marketing for a luxury real estate company. Despite their busy schedules, they once shared a relationship full of laughter, midnight drives, and small traditions that made their marriage feel unbreakable. Every Friday night, they ordered Chinese takeout and watched old movies together. Ethan loved how Laura could brighten a room with a smile, while Laura admired Ethan's calm nature and quiet loyalty. Friends often described them as the perfect couple. But over the last year, something changed. Laura became distant. Her work hours grew longer, and she constantly mentioned late-night meetings with important clients. Ethan tried not to question it because he trusted her completely. Still, he couldn't ignore the growing silence between them. One evening, while Laura was getting ready for another client dinner, Ethan casually asked who she was meeting. "A new investor named Doug," she replied while fixing her earrings. Ethan smiled faintly and said, "Well, say hi to Doug for me." The color suddenly disappeared from Laura's face. Seconds later, her phone rang on the kitchen counter. The caller ID read, "Doug." Laura froze the moment Ethan glanced at the phone screen. Her hands trembled slightly as the ringing continued between them like a ticking bomb. Ethan looked at her carefully. "Aren't you going to answer?" Laura quickly grabbed the phone and silenced it. "It's work-related," she whispered nervously. But Ethan already sensed something was wrong. For weeks, he had noticed little details that didn't make sense: hidden smiles while texting, late-night showers after coming home, and excuses that sounded rehearsed. Yet he ignored every sign because he loved her too much to imagine betrayal. That night, Laura left for the dinner, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the fear in her eyes. Unable to calm himself, he drove to the restaurant she mentioned earlier. Through the window, he saw Laura sitting alone at a corner table. No Doug. No client meeting. Just Laura crying quietly into her hands. Confused, Ethan stayed hidden outside and watched as an older man finally approached her table. The moment Laura saw him, she stood up emotionally and hugged him tightly. Ethan's heart shattered instantly. Certain he had just witnessed the truth, he drove away before she could see him, unaware that the Real story was far more painful than betrayal. For the next several days, Ethan barely spoke to Laura. The silence inside their home became unbearable. Laura tried starting conversations, but Ethan answered coldly or avoided her completely. Deep down, he felt humiliated, angry, and heartbroken. Meanwhile, Laura looked emotionally exhausted. She barely slept and often sat awake at night staring into darkness. Finally, one evening, Ethan couldn't hold it in anymore. "Who is he?" he demanded. Laura's eyes immediately filled with tears. "You think I'm cheating on you," she whispered painfully. "What else am I supposed to think?" Ethan replied bitterly, "I saw you with him." Laura began crying uncontrollably before finally revealing the truth. Doug wasn't a lover. He was her biological father. Years before meeting Ethan, Laura had been abandoned as a child and raised in foster care. Months ago, Doug unexpectedly contacted her after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. Ashamed of abandoning her, he wanted one final chance to know his daughter before he died. Laura hid the meetings because she didn't know how to explain the pain, anger, and confusion she felt. Ethan stood frozen in shock. In trying to protect herself emotionally, Laura had accidentally destroyed the trust between them. That night changed everything between Ethan and Laura. 4 hours, they sat together crying, talking honestly for the first time in months. Laura admitted she was terrified Ethan would judge her for reconnecting with the father who abandoned her. Ethan confessed how quickly fear had turned into suspicion. Slowly, they realized the real problem was never another man. It was silence. Over the following weeks, Ethan supported Laura as she struggled through painful meetings with Doug. Some days she hated him for leaving. Other days she simply wanted answers about the childhood she never had. When Doug eventually passed away, Laura felt both grief and relief. One evening, while sitting beside Ethan on their porch, she whispered softly, "I spent so much time hiding my pain that I forgot you were the person who would have carried it with me." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Their marriage survived not because they were perfect, but because they finally learned how dangerous unspoken fears can become. Years later, Ethan still remembered the moment Doug's name appeared on Laura's phone. At the time, it felt like the end of their love story. Instead, it became the moment they truly understood each other for the first time.